everybody, how's it going? Ethan here, welcome to Radwood TV. Like many of you, I have a few Rad-era cars. Some are running just great, like my Chevy Nova Twin Cam and my BMW 740iL, but I've taken on a few 80s and 90s project cars that have issues. Yes, I probably have too many cars, but that's not the point of this video. In this video, I want to talk about the challenges of keeping your 80s and 90s cars on the road. I'll tell you a little bit about the issues that I'm running into, and we'll also talk with Radwood co-founders Brad and Lane and get their thoughts on the subject. Let's go take a look at my incredibly rare 1991 Geo Prism GSI. About a month ago, this car blew up while cruising down the freeway. But even with that catastrophic engine failure, I do still want to restore this car. And since it's so rare, I do kind of want to keep it as original as possible. Most mechanical parts are fairly easy to come by, but finding a replacement 16-valve 4A GE motor has been a little bit more tough than I had thought it would be. I've been searching around for about a month without any luck. Finding replacement interior parts has also been a hard-fought battle. Many of these parts are brittle and have cracked, like the dashboard. My only chance for a replacement dashboard is a well-taken-care of Prism that hits a junkyard. Chances of finding one without a cracked dash are pretty slim. And there are certainly not any companies making interior reproduction parts for a Prism, at least as far as I know. Let's go take a look at one of my other Rad-era project cars, my 1990 Pontiac Turbo Grand Prix ASC Mclaren. This car is just dripping with 1990s goodness. But it's also provided me with a very difficult to fix brake problem. I made a video about this car over on my channel Hello Road, and here's a little excerpt from that video to show you how bad these brakes are. So why was it only $1,000? Oh God, it's really hard to stop this thing. That's why it was only $1,000. Right over here is a part of the anti-lock braking system, which includes an accumulator ball which stores pressure. When working properly, the brakes on this car are fantastic, but the technology here was maybe just a bit ahead of its time to work reliably. As far as I can tell, this system has a 100% failure rate. I would bet that every Turbo Grand Prix has had this problem at least once. And I'm sure you've guessed it, but this system has obviously failed on my car as well. What this amounts to is a car that's kind of dangerous to drive. It takes an insane amount of force to stop the car. So that's why I was able to get this project car for only $1,000. Obviously, the last owner, and likely the owner before them, gave up on this project car because of the brakes. Okay, now that I'm a little bit depressed about the state of my project cars, maybe we can talk to Radwood co-founders Brad and Lane and see if we can get some sage advice from them on how they deal with their project cars. Beep, boop, bop. Hey, Brad, can you hear me? All right, let me ask you a few questions. What are your current Rad-era project cars?
So I have Project Armadillo, which is a 1995 Audi S6, as you've seen on the channel before. I have a 97 Boxster, chronicled on flat6s.com. It's called the Project Boxster Club Sport. I just traded my 74 MG Midget for a 1986, I think, 924S, which will definitely become a feature of this channel as well. And tangentially related, I have this. It is my 1976 912E. It's pre-rad, but it's sort of in there as well.
All right, what about you, Lane? What are your project cars?
At the moment, my Radwood-era project cars are an early 1985 Porsche 944, and then the Radwood crew collectively just picked up an early 1983 Porsche 944 Euro.
What project car of yours is the hardest to find parts for?
In general, there's a pretty good aftermarket following for German cars. I would say that the S6 is probably the hardest to find parts for, depending on what the part is. Interior trim is a little difficult. Actually, exterior trim is a little bit difficult. Engine parts are pretty easy. I've had a few problems getting small things like CV joint boots. A lot of places have them listed incorrectly. And actually, when I take that car in to get smogged, every smog place says that it should have an EGR, and it doesn't from the factory, and it's just a mistake in the books. So I have to deal with that every year when I take it in to get smogged. So,
Lane, do you have the same problems finding parts for your cars?
The 944s actually aren't very hard to find parts for. They're pretty easy, actually. I mean, Porsche makes a lot of parts, actually, and they're making more and more parts for these older 80s cars every day. And then there's also a big aftermarket parts supply chain, as well as a lot of like wrecking yards, Porsche specific wrecking yards. So it's pretty easy to find parts for all these cars, especially 944s. I mean, they made so many of them. They were the top selling Porsche forever. So they made enough of them where you can find parts all day long.
Have you ever had to engineer a solution of your own because factory parts were no longer available?
A couple of times, yeah, actually. So on the Audi right now, I'm actually fabricating a solution to hold up the panel that holds the sunroof switch. Those are just no longer available, and used ones are just as bad as any other one that I have. So I've gone through a few of them and they continue to break, and that's a problem. Also on the 912E, there is a specific intake boot that is rubber, and that original boot is no longer available because they only made 2,000 of these, and Porsche doesn't care. So I have had to basically take it off, kind of remold a bit with some epoxy, and I've got some tape holding it on, which doesn't look very good. So yeah, it kind of sucks that that's no longer available because it is definitely a blemish on the car.
All right, how about you, Lane?
You know what? I definitely have, actually, with the 944. I've engineered solutions just because of the price of the parts. So currently on the 944, on my project car, my 85, I have a GTS style front bumper, which is like, it's a super rare, it's a replica of that bumper, but it takes European front turn signals and European driving lights. The European front turn signals are really expensive, like hundreds of dollars, and the driving lights are like $500 or something for the set. So they are available, but I don't know, I didn't want to pony up that money. For the meantime, I filled those holes with, you know, I just got a sheet of aluminum and I traced out the shape and, you know, made basically blocking plates for that. Everything I've done is available. It's just that I kind of went the cheaper route, making my own stuff. So,
all right, Brad, have you ever given up on a project car? And if so, what made you throw in the towel?
Twice I gave up on project cars, both when I was younger. The first was my daily driver, Crown Victoria. I used it as a rallycross car. It was a fun car and it was great, but then I had an issue with the fuel pump, and I replaced the fuel pump and it didn't fix the problem, so I got discouraged and ended up selling the car. And I still regret that because I do love that car, but it was a hunk of crap. Also, I had a 93 Fox body Mustang convertible that I was turning into a Lemons car, and I gave up on that project even though I had dumped a ton of money into it because I ended up moving. I ended up giving up on my 83 944 also because I moved. That just wouldn't have made sense to ship it. It would have been like $2,000 to ship a car that I paid $1,500 for. So although I do regret it and I wish that I had made that investment, I miss that car a lot.
All right, how about you, Lane?
So I have given up on a project car, but it was kind of like giving up at first sight. I bought a car, and this actually wasn't a Radwood-era car, it was a 70s car. So I bought a 72 Porsche 914, sight unseen from the middle of the country, and had it shipped out here. And when it arrived, I soon realized that the seat was falling through the floor and hitting the ground, and the rocker panels had been rusted and poorly repaired. So, and more rust than that. The battery box, normal problems on Porsche 914s, but tons of rust. And I gave up immediately. So I basically just welded the floor pan, what I needed to get the seat sitting right, and I moved the car on to the next seller. I think I just did the smart thing, really. I mean, I really couldn't do all the work myself, and if I paid someone, it would have cost, you know, $30,000 to get that car even decent. It just didn't make sense, which a lot of times project cars don't make sense.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned about working on project cars?
I would say my number one takeaway from wrenching on all of this stuff myself is even if you don't necessarily know exactly what you're doing, a lot of this stuff is is relatively straightforward. More often than not, I'll dive into a project before I know exactly how it's going to turn out, and I learn by doing. I get hands-on, I get my hands dirty, and I just kind of figure it out. If you're mechanically inclined and you know more or less how things work, chances are you'll be able to figure it out.
Okay, Lane, what are some lessons that you've learned about working on project cars?
So my biggest lesson about project cars is really what I was just talking about. It's just that usually a project car isn't worth it, you know? And I mean, every kind of old car is a project car. So, you know, every 80s car you buy, whether it's a beautiful car like this Porsche 911 I'm sitting in, which is an 89 Carrera Club Sport with 20 some odd thousand miles on it, even this car is a project car at this point because it's just an older car. So it's gonna have little things go wrong and stuff like that. But one thing I've learned is everyone knows this, but it's hard to practice because you don't always have tons of money, is that you want to buy the best car you can afford, always. You don't want to skimp on that at all. And sometimes you might go with a lesser model because you can buy a better car of that model. So, you know, with like a Porsche 944, if you only have $7,000 to spend, don't buy the crappiest 944 turbo in the world. Go and buy one of the nicest 944, you know, early 944s or NAs, 2.5 liters that you can find, and you'll just be you'll have, you know, you're still going to have little tinkering and projects you're going to want to do, but you're going to have such a better base to start with. And that's what I've learned. And you kind of have to like you have to tell yourself this all the time, you know? Yeah, that's the biggest lesson learned, really.
Hey Brad, what advice would you give somebody who's buying a Rad-era project car?
My advice to anybody that's buying a Radwood-era project car would be, don't let it sit. These cars love to be driven, and more often than not, driving them helps alleviate some of those potential issues. You have fewer issues with things like fuel lines or brake lines. Cars don't like to sit from this era, especially. The more they sit, they just waste away. So don't let that happen to them.
Any other thoughts you want to share on the subject?
If you do get a project and you do get it running, bring it out to Radwood. We always want to see them, and not necessarily in Concord condition. I want to see stuff that's rare and exciting and interesting. So if you have something that you're passionate about, even if it's not perfect, definitely bring it to the show. One of the reasons that we came up with this show was to give kind of weird stuff that hasn't always had a following a place to show. When I was in Ohio and I had my 83 944, I would take it out to shows and people would go, oh yeah, you can park over under the trees over there where nobody will even look at it. And they would say, oh, it's not worth, you know, paying the entry fee to get in with your weird piece of crap Porsche. You know, I want to have a welcoming environment, and I want people to feel like their car is the center of attention, if only for one day. Get out there, drive them, appreciate them, have fun with them, and bring them to Radwood.
If you're the type of person that's like down to get dirty and work on a car, then I suggest buying a project car. And you know, really 80s, 90s Radwood-era project cars are the easiest of any of them. I mean, these cars are like still docile in traffic. They start every time. They're pretty nice, you know, pretty good driving cars, and they could still be dailies, which is really cool. I was driving my 944. I think I've put like 30,000 miles on it or so in the last 4 years I've owned it, and it was a great everyday car, really. It just starts every time and goes and everything like that. But you are going to run into little problems, and you know, there's going to be maintenance items, and they might all land at the same time. You know, you might have a clutch go out and head gasket and a bunch of other things, and you have to like be willing to forge through it. And actually the hardest thing is that $5,000 car or less, where you have a big repair item go out, like a 944 for example. The clutch is like a 14-hour job, so, and then the parts are $800, let's say. So the book on repairing that clutch is $2,500 to $3,000. A lot of cars, a lot of 944s are sent to the junkyard because the clutch goes bad. Because in your mind, you're trying to justify spending $3,000 on a car that's worth maybe $3,000 or maybe $5,000, you know, something like that, maybe $2,000. It's really hard to do, but you can't really think about these cars that way. You have to think of them as how much fun you're having. Think about people that drive normal cars and Toyota Camrys and all these brand new cars every day. They're spending way more than that. You know, like I drive a brand new GTI, and my monthly nut on that thing is $500. So, you know, I'm spending tons of money. I'm spending, what is that, $6,000 a year. I'm losing $6,000 a year driving that car. So a lot of these cars, you're not buying them to make money, you're just buying them to have fun and enjoy them. So remember that.
I'd really love to hear what you do to keep your 80s and 90s vehicles on the road. It'll be fuel to help me keep moving forward on my 80s and 90s projects, and may even help some other people here as well. Post up your comments below. Thanks for watching. If you like what you've seen, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We'll have more videos featuring rad era cars and events coming soon. And if you want to see more about my Turbo Grand Prix and my Geo Prism, head on over to my channel, Hello Road. Finally, be sure to head on over to radwood.org to get yourself a Radwood t-shirt and to find out about the next Radwood event. See you later.